The Bible is this old book, a really old book, by the way, that has other books in it. And all of these books have problems. Hey there, welcome to my channel. My name is Adam Jordan Clark, and today I am going to be talking to you about why I am not a Christian apologist. For those of you who don't know what an apologist is, it's basically somebody who tries to defend Christianity or defend the Bible or defend God against atheism or Islam or any other religion that disagrees with Christianity. I am not an apologist, and the reason why I'm not an apologist is because I don't think that it's my job to defend Christianity or the Bible or God. I think that if God's real, if he really exists, and if he really wrote the Bible, he can defend himself. Pure and simple, he's big enough to handle his own problems. He doesn't need some guy trying to fix his problems for him. He can handle it himself. So, I know people are going to object to this and say, well, you have a poor understanding of apologetics. Okay. All right. That's fine. But what I do have is a very good understanding of the Bible, and I have a good understanding of theology. And I can tell you that apologetics in and of itself is absolutely not necessary at all. If you're a Christian, you do not need apologetics. That's number one. Number two, you do not need to be an apologist, nor should you be listening to apologists at all. The reason why you shouldn't be listening to apologists simply is because they confuse the heck out of you. I mean, absolutely confuse everything. You listen to an apologist, you're going to be confused about God. If you listen to an apologist, you're going to be confused about Christianity. And if you listen to an apologist, you're going to be confused about the Bible. What I think of a Christian apologist, not to put him in a bad light or anything, but when I think about a Christian apologist, I tend to think about a used car salesman or maybe even a snake oil salesman. Again, it's not the best terminology, I understand, and I'm not trying to put them in bad light, but I'm just trying to tell you what I actually think about Christian apologists. I don't really think that they do a lot of good. I think that they do more harm than good when it comes to the Bible and theology. Just so you know, theology is the study of God. So we're talking about God and his existence. And a theologian, or people who do theology, generally speaking, assume the existence of God at some level. And so, theologians aren't really concerned about God's existence or his non-existence or whatever. So perhaps maybe my opinion is biased in this area, and it probably is. But what I'll tell you is that my concern is actually the Bible. When I listen to Christian apologists talk about the Bible, I'm very disappointed. Very disappointed. Because a lot of Christian apologists are actually kind of smart people. Pretty intelligent, actually. And some of them are actually pretty educated. And when you look at some of the things they say, you go, wow, that's pretty good. But then you hear them talk about the Bible and you're like, wow, it's pretty not good. It's pretty bad. And I'm not really sure why that happens. I can't say with any certainty as to why they get the Bible wrong, but they do. And you would think that if they're going to defend God and the Bible and Christianity, they would have that element down. But they don't. And it's very puzzling to me. So I'm trying to sort of do a couple of things in this video. Number one, I'm trying to explain why I'm not an apologist. And number two, I'm trying to explain why Christian apologist and Christian apologetics really needs to take a back seat on a lot of issues. So, number one, when it comes to the Bible, This is a very big issue. What I will say about the Bible is this. You need to really think about the Bible. And when I say you, I mean you, the person watching this video, and everybody else in the world, for that matter. You need to think of the Bible as an old piece of furniture that was passed down from generation to generation to generation to generation. And, it was in a fire one night and, it got burned, and then somebody cleaned off the burn marks, and you can still see it, but it kind of smells like fire. And, grandma, used to put her clothes in there. And when little Johnny was a kid, he spilled a drink on there. And so the wood's kind of, buckled on one end of the dresser, but it's not. It's got some nicks and dings because it's been moved around so many times, and so on and so on and so on. In other words, it gives it characteristic. And the reason why you appreciate the furniture is not only because it's so old, but because every little mark on it has a story to tell. And that's exactly what the Bible is like. The Bible is this old book, a really old book, by the way, that has other books in it. And all of these books have problems. Now, I don't know what you want to call those problems, but you can call them contradictions or discrepancies or variations or errors or mistakes, whatever you want to call them. I don't care. Problems is what I like to go with, but they have problems. And what Christian apologists tend to do is come in and basically ignore those problems. And the way they ignore those problems is by basically acknowledging that there might be a problem and then creating a distraction about something else, a red herring, and they create another topic that has nothing to do with this issue to distract everybody from the real evidence. And that's what they did. For example, Jesus's robe when he was crucified. What robe? What was the color of his robe? One account says it was scarlet, and the other one says it's purple. Well, obviously, those are two different colors. What a Christian apologist is most likely going to say is that maybe it was the blood of Jesus that messed up the color, or maybe it was the perspective. Maybe when you looked at it in the sunlight, it was scarlet, and then it was purple when you looked at it in the dark. Or I don't know. I don't know what they're going to say, but it's going to be something crazy like that. My question to them as a theologian, somebody who reads the Bible, somebody who appreciates the Bible for what it actually says, my question is this: where does it say in the Bible anything about the blood mixing with the actual color of the robe or changing the color of the robe? Where does it talk about sunlight changing the color? Where does it talk about people's eyes being messed up and not being able to see it? The point is that if you're going to make an argument, you have to base your argument on evidence, not imagination. And that's exactly the problem with Christian apologists, is that they don't make arguments based on evidence. Instead, they make arguments based on their imagination. And fundamentally what they do is they basically hear somebody say something, and then they spend all their time telling you why that other person is wrong. Well, I don't care about why they're wrong. What I care about is why you think you're right. I like to think about it like this. It's like a court case. A lawyer sitting in there, and there's a judge or a jury or whatever, and then there's another lawyer on the other side. This lawyer comes in and says, look, that guy over there killed this dude. How do we know he killed the dude? Well, we have some guns, and we have a knife or whatever. He shot the dude, stabbed the dude. We have his fingerprints on the knife and the gun. We have video evidence of him being there. We have his footprints. We have all kinds of evidence that clearly say that this dude was there. And then, the lawyer on the other side who's defending this murderer basically says, well, Your Honor, I mean, what about the sunlight? What about the moon? What about the stars? What about whatever he's going to make up? In other words, he's ignoring the argument, he's ignoring the evidence, and he's just making up stuff, his own imagination. That's how I like to think of Christian apologists. They make stuff up, and they ignore evidence. And if you really pay attention to what they're saying, even the highest levels, the highest guys, I mean, they don't really do too well of a job at explaining some of these problems. Going back to the Bible, this is probably where things are going to get a little bit complicated. Because at the end of the day, you have to look for evidence. You have to understand that evidence. And a lot of times, the evidence is good. The evidence doesn't point to anything confusing or complicated at all. But there are times where evidence kind of is, hard to understand, if you will. This is why I like to compare the Bible to an old piece of furniture that's been passed down generation to generation to generation. We all know that it's got scars and scuffed up and beat up, and it's been around for a long time. We cannot sit here and say that it's a perfect piece of furniture. Now, we could say that it's perfectly in good condition for where it's come from in its story and how it's gotten here. We could say it's in good condition, but we can't say it's perfect. But the problem is when you have another group of people who come in and say, no, it's absolutely perfect. There are no mistakes. There are no blemishes. There's nothing wrong with the furniture. It's in absolute pristine condition. But you go and look at it and you say, well, look, why is it wrinkly here? Why has it got this scar? Why has it got these scratches and so on and so on and so on? And they say, no, go look at the sunset outside. It's beautiful. You're being distracted from the real issue. What I'm trying to tell you is this. If you read the Bible long enough and hard enough, you're going to find some problems. You're going to find some stuff that just doesn't make any sense. Things will get very complicated. You can call them differences, variations, errors, mistakes, contradictions, whatever you want to call them. I don't care. There are some problems. And I think that what you need to do as a Bible reader and a Bible interpreter is find those problems and understand those problems in their context. Because many times what those problems tell us is something very beautiful, actually. It actually tells us of a story, 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 of a story. And we have to use a little bit of imagination, not bad imagination, but good imagination to kind of reconstruct about what we think may have happened. For example, Judas and how he killed himself. It's very clear that he was a follower of Jesus, and it's very clear that he betrayed Jesus. But is it clear that he actually killed himself? Well, I don't know. It's a little hard to say. It's also very hard to say that if he did take 30 pieces of silver, what did he do with it? Because Matthew says one thing and Luke says a completely different thing. One says he gave the money back, and the other one says no, he used that same money to go and buy a field. So there is a contradiction there, obviously. And one account says he hung himself, and the other one says, no, he fell headlong, probably stabbed himself of some sort. The point is that if he did commit suicide, we don't know how it happened, and that's very reasonable, because if somebody commits suicide in the modern world, we still don't really know how it happened, unless we have a detective or an investigator go and examine and look for evidence and use their expertise in that area. But if we didn't have investigators, like they didn't have investigators 2,000 years ago, you can see how so many people would come up with many different ideas. But just because there's a problem here doesn't mean we should ignore the evidence. It doesn't mean that we should lie to people or deceive people. It means that we should tell people, yeah, there probably is a contradiction, but the contradiction doesn't really mean anything. Instead, what we should be thinking about is why are there different traditions? And this is not the only two traditions that we have. There are some other traditions about Judas as well. The point is that we don't really know a whole lot about Judas, and we know that the early church didn't know a whole lot about him either, and that's why there were so many different traditions about Judas. And so we need to look at these traditions and sort of understand them in the context of storytelling. So it's a story of a story of a story of a story of a story, and it probably had a sermon attached to it. I can only imagine how many early pastors in the 1st century and 2nd century, possibly even 3rd century, who preached sermons on Judas. And they probably weren't sermons of betrayal. They probably weren't sermons of money. They were probably sermons that were more in depth. For example, a sermon against suicide. Something we probably wouldn't preach today, but perhaps maybe 2,000 years ago, they would have preached against suicide. And so it really opens up the doors for us. And this is the beauty of the Bible. When you find a problem in the Bible, you're not just finding a problem in the Bible and you just walk away saying it's all hopelessly flawed. What you're finding is real beauty. what you're finding is authenticity, authentic stories, and authentic things that really challenge us in how we think about life. And that's really what's amazing about the Bible. So the Bible tells us a lot about God, but it also tells us a lot about life. And that's one of the reasons why you should read the Bible more often, even if you are an atheist, because it tells you a lot about humanity. And that's one of the second greatest questions you could ever ask. I think the first question you could ever ask that's the greatest of all is, who is God? I think the second question is, what does it mean to be human? If you think about that question, what is humanity? What does it mean to be human? You'll find yourself really finding a lot of bad stuff, but you'll also find a lot of good stuff. I think when you read the Bible, you're going to find a lot of bad stuff. You're also going to find a lot of good stuff. And that's the real beauty in reading the Bible. It's the good stuff. It's like a piece of furniture that has all kinds of mistakes and blemishes, and it's been passed down and beat up and kicked around. But yet the fact that it has survived, and it's survived in that great of condition, and there are these problems, it's amazing. It tells us so much about that piece of furniture. Because if it is burned on one piece, or somebody spilled a drink and it started to buckle, that little problem, that mistake or difference or contradiction or problem, if you will, has a story. It has a story attached to it. There's a reason why it's that way. There's a reason why there's different traditions about Judas. There's a reason why the Gospels don't always harmonize or talk about the same exact things in the same ways or the same details. There's reasons why. And it's our job as Bible readers to understand those things. It is not a good idea for us to say that it's absolutely perfect and there are no errors in the Bible. That's a mistake. It is wrong to tell people that there are no errors in the Bible. It's absolutely wrong. It is morally wrong to tell people that. Instead, what we should be telling people is there are some problems, and it's fine because each little problem has its own story, and we need to be thinking about those stories, and we need to allow those stories to minister to us and teach us about God and teach us about humanity. My name is Adam Jordan Clark, and if you like this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. And don't forget to subscribe, because I publish a video every single day on all kinds of interesting facts and things and ideas about the Bible that you're not going to get anywhere else, because there's only one of me. I don't have a twin. At least I don't think I do. But there's only one of me, and my name is Adam Jordan Clark. And as always, I will see you in the next video.